long before the cathedrals of stone or the empires of law. Even before written history began, there were the Druids. They were a civilization of thinkers, healers, and philosophers whose influence stretched quietly beneath the soil of what would one day become the United Kingdom. They left no cities of marble, no monuments carved in their image, yet their presence lingers everywhere in the stone circles that still mark the landscape, in the myths that shaped early British identity, and in the silence between history and legend. In the 1st century BCE, Britain was a collection of Celtic tribes. Among them, the Druids stood apart. They were not kings, yet they ruled by influence. They commanded no armies, yet even warriors sought their counsel. They were the keepers of law and lore, in a world that measured time not by clocks, but by the movement of the stars. Julius Caesar, one of history's most precise chroniclers, encountered them during his campaigns in Gaul. He described them as philosophers who studied the nature of things, the motion of the stars, and the power of the gods. But he also noted something else. They taught their knowledge, not through writing, but through oral tradition, memorizing thousands of verses. Each generation passed wisdom to the next, like a living archive. It was a system that depended on memory, discipline, and devotion, but also secrecy. Tote Druids. The written word was fragile, too easily corrupted. They believed truth could only survive through the mind, not the page. And so, when Rome advanced with its legions and libraries, the Druidic world began to fade. Not because it was defeated, but because it could not be captured. Quod in Daitris, CE. When the Romans invaded Britain under Emperor Claudius, they found a land divided by tribes but united by belief. The Druids were the unseen bond, performing ceremonies beneath oak trees, honoring the natural world, and guiding the moral order of their people. Yet to Rome, they were a challenge. A society that obeyed no written code, no central government, and no Caesar could not be controlled. The Roman historian Tacitus later wrote that the Druids presided over cruel rites, a phrase that history repeated so often that it became reputation. But behind that accusation was fear not of rituals, but of resistance. The Romans targeted the island of Anglesey, off the coast of Ulster, heart of Druidic learning. In 60 CE, Roman general Suetonius Paulinus led his troops across the Many Strait. Tacitus recorded what they saw: a line of women dressed in black, their hair disheveled, raising torches as the Druids lifted their hands to the sky, calling down curses. Whether this account was true or propaganda, no one can say, but the outcome was certain. The sacred groves of Anglesey were cut down, the temples burned, and with that act, the Druids disappeared from Roman record. Yet history has a way of leaving traces. Across Britain, hundreds of prehistoric sites remained older even than the Druids, but later associated with them. Chief among them was Stonehenge. The Romans themselves wondered who built it, and in medieval chronicles, it was said the Druids had used it as an observatory, a calendar aligned perfectly with the solstices. Modern archaeology later revealed that Stonehenge predates the Druids by over 1,000 years, yet its alignment with the sun still fits their worldview. That nature was the greatest temple, and time itself was sacred. The Druidic connection to the natural world wasn't mystical escapism, it was empirical. They observed lunar cycles to guide planting, the stars to measure seasons, and animal behavior to predict weather. They saw divinity not as a figure to be worshipped, but as a pattern to be understood. In that way, they were among the earliest scientists of Europe, philosophers who merged logic and faith without dividing them. But when knowledge becomes power, it attracts opposition. As Roman culture expanded, Druidic influence declined. Their teachings survived in whispers through Celtic mythology, bardic poetry, and even Christian scribes who preserved fragments of the old faith inside new stories. Archaeologists today still uncover fragments of their world. At Linsarig Bach in Anglesey, a lake yielded more than 150 iron weapons and tools, deliberately thrown into its waters. Carbon dating places these objects around the very years Rome invaded. It's as if the Druids left behind a final gesture, not a surrender, but a message that their faith belonged to the land, not the conqueror. In 1984, Researchers used aerial photography to map ancient earthworks across southern England. They discovered circular enclosures, once dismissed as random, aligned precisely with solar and lunar events. The precision suggested intelligence, not superstition. One archaeologist called it geometry without rulers. Another called it the mathematics of faith. In their quiet way, the Druids had measured time through light, their science simply expressed in symbols rather than equations. Though the Romans erased their temples, they could not erase their influence. By the Enlightenment, scholars began to see them not as magicians, but as philosophers who bridged religion and reason. In the 18th century, a neo-Druid revival emerged when antiquarians, like William Stukeley, studied Stonehenge and declared it a Druid temple. Even if his conclusions were partly wrong, his curiosity was right. The Druids, real or reimagined, still stood for something larger, a harmony between humankind and nature that modern life was beginning to forget. Across Britain today, remnants of their world remain hidden in plain sight. Place names like Oak Grove or Holywell trace back to Druidic rituals of water and wood. At Avebury, the largest stone circle in Europe, visitors still walk the ancient paths at sunrise. Even the word Druid itself derives from the Celtic Druides, meaning oakseer or knower of trees, to Druids. The oak was not just a tree, it was a teacher, its roots holding the earth as its branches touched the sky. As modern archaeologists re-examine Iron Age Britain, the image of the Druid continues to evolve. They were not cloaked mystics performing spells by moonlight, but scholars of nature's logic, bound by oral law and moral duty. Today, researchers use LiDAR scanning and AI to study ancient landscapes. The data reveals geometric alignments, invisible from the ground, lines and mounds connecting across miles of countryside, aligned with solar and lunar cycles. These discoveries suggest a civilization that understood celestial movement with astonishing precision. A 2023 study from the University of Oxford analyzed burial remains from Iron Age ritual sites. Isotopic analysis revealed traces of continental minerals and bones found in Britain, proof of a vast network of Celtic knowledge across Europe. It confirmed what Caesar once hinted: their civilization wasn't isolated. It was interconnected and deeply philosophical. The Romans saw them as a threat because their power lay not in swords, but in conviction. When that belief was silenced, Britain entered what historians call the Quiet Centuries. But inside that silence, the Druidic legacy endured. Modern Britain carries their memory, not in ruins, but in rhythm, in festivals marking solstice, and in the stone circles that still draw thousands at midsummer dawn. When the first rays of sunlight strike the heelstone at Stonehenge, cutting through the mist, the moment feels less like a spectacle and more like a reunion, an acknowledgement that ancient understanding still lingers. The Druids represent a paradox, people who knew so much, yet wrote down nothing. But perhaps that was the point. To leave no record is to trust memory. To vanish without monuments is to become one with the landscape itself. The Druids did not disappear. They dissolved into history, leaving behind a civilization not lost, but waiting to be remembered. Maybe nothing extraordinary vanished the truth hidden in plain sight. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into the past, please like this video and subscribe for more stories hidden in history.